It was supposed to be just another ordinary day at a construction site in the heart of the city. Workers moved in rhythm, machines hummed in the background, and blueprint pages flapped in the breeze like choreography in motion. Concrete was being poured, beams were rising, everything unfolding as planned. Until the stillness cracked. A police cruiser rolled up fast, tires grinding over gravel like a warning. Doors slammed. A uniformed officer stepped out, eyes already locked, not scanning the area, not assessing the situation, just zeroed in on one man. A black man. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't out of place. He stood near the central framework, wearing a reflective vest, holding rolled-up plans, every bit a part of the site's heartbeat. But none of that mattered. "Hey, step away from the site," the officer barked, hand hovering near his holster, voice sharp enough to turn heads across the lot. The man turned, puzzled. "Excuse me?" "I said step away. Now, what are you doing here?" No hello, no ID check, just suspicion wrapped in authority. "I work here," the man replied, steady but clearly thrown off. "I'm with the team." But the officer wasn't listening. Not really, because what he saw wasn't a professional, wasn't a foreman, wasn't an engineer. He saw a threat. And in that split second, everyone watching knew. This wasn't going to be just another workday. This was about to become a story they'd all remember. The sun was barely past its peak, casting a golden glare across the steel skeleton of a building in progress. Workers shouted instructions over the hum of machines, boots stomped over gravel, and the rhythm of progress echoed like a heartbeat through the site. Amid the noise, a black man in a reflective vest stood near a cluster of blueprints, reviewing notes and pointing toward a structural beam that had just been installed. Everything was flowing until the rhythm stopped. A sudden screech of tires cut through the air like a blade. A police cruiser rolled up slowly, almost too slowly, like a predator stalking its prey. The workers paused momentarily, glancing over, then returned to their tasks. All except one, the man with the blueprints. His eyes met the officer's as the door swung open. The officer stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, sunglasses hiding his eyes. His hand rested near his waist, close to his holster, not as a reflex, but as a statement. He didn't look around, didn't scan the site. His gaze locked straight onto the man near the blueprints, like he had already made up his mind. "Hey!" the officer barked, his voice cutting through the metallic clatter. "You! What are you doing here?" The man blinked, puzzled. "Excuse me?" "I said," the officer repeated, taking a few sharp steps forward, "this is private property. You got no business here." I work here," the man replied, confused but composed. "Is there a problem?" The officer's tone grew harder. "You work here?" "Doing what? Security?" "No," the man said, holding his blueprint folder tighter. "I'm the lead engineer." That answer didn't land. The officer scoffed. "Don't play games with me. Where's your ID?" "It's in my vest pocket," he said, already reaching for it, but the officer took a step closer, hand now firmly on his holster. "Slowly," he warned. "Nice and slow." The man paused, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "Okay, I just want to show you I belong here." There was a moment of charged silence, heavy and fragile. Nearby, a forklift came to a halt. A few workers turned their heads. Something wasn't right. You could feel it. That kind of tension doesn't hide. The officer's voice dropped to a growl. "I don't care what you say. You don't look like an engineer." And just like that, the real reason behind the confrontation cracked through the surface. The words hit like a slap. The air thickened. The man stared at the officer, stunned but not surprised, because this wasn't about trespassing. It never was. He took a breath. "Sir, I designed this building. Every beam, every bolt. I've worked here for months." But the officer didn't back down. "I said step away from the site, now." The man didn't move, not out of defiance, but out of disbelief. He wasn't being asked to explain. He was being erased, and somewhere behind him, someone whispered, "Is this really happening right now?" Because everyone on that site knew exactly who he was. Everyone, except the man with the badge. Have you ever witnessed someone being judged before even speaking a word? Tell us in the comments if you've seen situations like this. Your story matters. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. The officer didn't ask for a name. He didn't scan the surroundings or question anyone else. His mind had already filled in the blanks, with a narrative written long before he ever stepped on that site. "You're trespassing," he said flatly, as if reading from a script he'd performed too many times before. He took a step closer, his stance rigid, his tone already escalating. "You don't belong here. I need you off this property now." The man kept his voice steady, though his heart was racing. "I'm part of the team here," he said, his hands still visible, posture non-threatening. "I'm authorized to be on site." "Authorized?" The officer scoffed. "Doing what exactly? Watching from the sidelines?" He looked him up and down with narrowed eyes, as if the man's skin, his clothes, or simply his presence, proved something criminal. "I'm the lead engineer," the man said, calmly but firmly. "This is my site. I'm overseeing the structure." That's when the officer laughed. A short, dismissive sound full of disbelief and contempt. "Right, and I'm the mayor," he snapped. He leaned in slightly, voice dropping to a cold sneer. "Come on, engineer. You're telling me you built this place? What, they hiring anyone now?" There was venom in the way he said "you," not a question, an accusation. Still, the man remained composed. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a laminated badge. His full name, title, photo, company logo. He held it out like a shield, like proof that reality was still supposed to matter. The officer didn't even look at it. "I don't care what paper you printed that on," he growled. "This site is restricted. You're coming with me." The man blinked. "You're not even going to read it?" "I don't need to," the officer barked. "You think carrying a fake ID gives you permission to walk wherever you want?" A few workers nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. Heads turned. Someone muttered, "He's serious?" Another said, "That's the guy who signed off on the foundation plan." But the officer's tunnel vision held firm. He saw a man standing tall, refusing to cower, and that challenged everything he thought he controlled. His tone hardened further. "I gave you an order. Either you leave this site, or I'll remove you myself." The man stood his ground, not with defiance, but with dignity. "Sir, I don't want this to escalate. I'm trying to cooperate. I'm simply doing my job." But that was the problem. To the officer, his job didn't look like a job he should be doing. And in that moment, it was no longer about credentials. It was about control. And proving who had the power to decide who belonged. Why do you think the officer refused to even look at the badge? Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for the full story. The energy shifted, fast. The officer's voice rose like a siren, sharp and commanding. "I said step back!" Before the man could respond, the officer lunged forward and shoved him hard in the chest. The force knocked him a few steps back. His hard hat slipped off, bouncing against the gravel. A rolled-up set of blueprints fell from his hands and unfurled like a flag hitting the dirt. The man gasped, trying to regain balance, hands up, not in resistance, but in surrender. "Please," he said, breath short. "There's no need for this. Just let me show you." "Show me what?" the officer snapped, grabbing at the man's arm. "A fake name? A made-up job?" "Number my credentials." "My ID is right here," the man insisted, trying again to reach slowly into his pocket. But the officer yanked him by the elbow. "Don't move," he shouted, tightening his grip. Keep your hands where I can see them." The man froze, his breathing heavy now. Not out of fear, but frustration. This wasn't just aggression, it was humiliation. He looked the officer in the eyes and spoke low, steady, and calm, as if trying to protect both of them from what might come next. "I am not a threat." But to the officer, calm wasn't de-escalation. It was defiance. Behind them, murmurs began to grow. Someone yelled, "Hey! What the hell are you doing?" Another shouted, "That's the engineer!" Let him go. Phones were out, cameras rolling. The crowd was no longer silent. Still, the officer acted as if he heard nothing. "You think this is a game?" he spat. "You think dressing the part makes you one of them?" The man's jaw clenched. His vest was dirty now, his documents scattered, his pride under assault in front of the very team he helped build. And yet, even now, he didn't raise his voice. He simply said, again and again, "Please, just let me show you who I am." But in that moment, the truth didn't matter. The badge in the officer's hand outweighed any fact in the engineer's pocket. And as gravel crunched under boots and camera lenses focused tighter, the question hanging in the air was no longer if this would end badly, but how soon. How would you have reacted in his place? Stay calm or speak out. Drop your opinion in the comments. We read everyone. And if this story has your attention, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. At first, no one knew how to react. The entire site seemed to pause mid-breath, caught between disbelief and confusion. Hammers stopped. Engines idled. The sound of steel meeting steel was replaced by stunned silence and scattered murmurs. Then, as the officer's voice climbed again, louder, sharper, angrier, the spell broke. "Hey, what's going on over there?" one worker called out, jogging toward the scene. Another yelled, "That's Elijah. He's the lead on this project." Heads turned. More boots moved in that direction. And just like that, the invisible line between bystander and witness vanished. One worker, hands still covered in dust, pulled out his phone and hit record. A second followed. Then a third. "Get this, all of it," someone whispered behind the camera. "He didn't do anything." Dozens of eyes were now fixed on the confrontation, but the officer didn't flinch, didn't stop. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. "You're resisting now? Is that what this is?" he barked, twisting the engineer's arm tighter despite no signs of struggle. "I'm not resisting," the man cried out, still trying to speak through clenched teeth and breathless shock. "Just let me talk." From behind the phones, someone shouted, "Let him go. You're attacking the wrong person. He's the one who designed this site. You're assaulting the guy who literally built this place." But the officer didn't hear them, or refused to. His tunnel vision was sealed shut. He wasn't surrounded by a crowd in his mind. He was surrounded by control. Only now the control was slipping. One of the workers stepped closer. "You're on camera, man. Everyone's filming this. You better think twice." Another added, "You're going to lose your badge over this." "You hear me? That's a professional you're dragging through the dirt." Still, the officer kept his grip, kept yelling, kept believing his version of the story, even as the real one was being documented from every angle. What he didn't see, what he couldn't process, was that he wasn't the one in control anymore. The cameras had taken over, and what they captured wasn't just a moment of abuse. It was a symbol. A man, qualified and respected, being reduced to a threat because of the color of his skin, in front of a crowd who knew exactly who he was. And this time, the world was watching. Have you ever had to pull out your phone to record injustice? Tell us your experience in the comments. It could help others. And remember to subscribe to see how this powerful moment unfolds. With one final, desperate motion, the man twisted just enough to slip his arm free. He didn't run. He didn't retaliate. Instead, he reached into his vest pocket, calmly, firmly, and pulled out a worn, laminated card. His ID. "Look," he said, breathless but unwavering. "Just look. The officer flinched, almost reaching for his weapon again, until he saw the card, the photo, the company logo, the title, Senior Structural Engineer, Elijah Carter. The crowd pressed in tighter now, silent as they watched the officer stare down at what he had refused to see just minutes earlier. A single card, clear, undeniable, truth in plastic form. "I don't just work here," Elijah said, straightening his back. "I designed this place, every bolt, every angle. The foundation under your feet? That was my calculation. The beams above your head? My math kept them standing." The words didn't come from anger. They came from exhaustion, from dignity, from a man who had held back everything, until now. "I spent 2 years of my life making sure this site wouldn't collapse, and you thought I didn't belong here because I don't look like what you expected." The officer didn't respond. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. The mask of authority slipped from his face. What replaced it wasn't control. It was something unfamiliar. Doubt. One of the workers stepped forward and echoed, "Yeah, he's our guy. He's the reason we have a job." Another added, "We call him the architect." "You just assaulted the person who signs off on every blueprint here." Phones were still recording. But now the camera lenses weren't just capturing injustice. They were capturing justice about to shift. The officer's posture changed. His chest wasn't puffed out anymore. His hand moved away from his holster. He glanced at the ID again, as if hoping it was fake. But it wasn't. It was real. Elijah Carter was real. And the truth didn't just hit. It crashed like thunder. He hadn't just wronged a man. He had tried to erase a legacy in front of the very building that man had brought to life. And for the first time, the silence came from the officer. How do you think the officer felt in that moment? Shocked? Ashamed? Share your take in the comments and subscribe to see what happens when the truth can't be ignored. By sunset, the video was everywhere. What began as a few smartphone recordings shared among coworkers had erupted into a global outcry. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, news feeds, headlines, hashtags. Elijah Carter's name was now a rallying cry. The footage showed it all, frame by frame. A respected black engineer being pushed, grabbed, humiliated on the site he designed, while calmly trying to prove his identity. Viewers didn't need commentary. The images spoke for themselves. And they were damning. The title on one viral post read, "Architect assaulted on his own project site because he wasn't supposed to be there." By midnight, the video had over 12 million views. Celebrities reposted it. Activists gave interviews. Lawyers offered pro bono representation. Civil rights groups issued formal statements. Even political figures weighed in. One tweet read, "Elijah Carter didn't raise his voice. He raised a city block, and still he wasn't seen." People weren't just angry. They were furious. The incident tapped into something deeper, something many had experienced but never seen so clearly recorded, what it feels like to be invisible in plain sight. Protests began to form outside the police precinct by morning. Not violent, just loud, just certain. Signs read, "We saw the video. Accountability now. Black excellence is not a threat." The pressure on the department mounted fast. They issued a vague statement at first, "We are reviewing the situation," but no one was buying it. The footage was too clear. The outrage too loud. A city council member demanded a formal investigation. A national network aired a full segment titled, "Assumed Guilty When Authority Meets Prejudice." For the first time in a long time, the system didn't get to look away. Not this time, because this time the whole world had already seen the truth, and no one was willing to forget it. Do you believe viral videos can truly change things, or is it just noise? Let's talk in the comments, and make sure you subscribe so you can follow how justice is pursued. Within 24 hours, the department was forced to act. Internal Affairs launched a formal investigation. The officer was immediately placed on administrative leave, pending review, as the statement read. But no press release could soften the damage. The eyes of the nation were fixed on what would happen next. Behind closed doors, a disciplinary hearing was assembled. A cold, quiet room with a polished table, file folders stacked neatly, and the weight of consequences hanging in the air. The officer walked in stiffly, his uniform crisp, his posture forced. He still carried that air of control, the kind that had served him on the street. But in this room, it felt misplaced. He scanned the faces at the table, department officials, legal observers, a representative from Internal Affairs. And then, his eyes landed on the final person seated across from him. His breath caught, his spine stiffened, the confidence in his walk shattered. Because seated across from him, calm and composed, was Elijah Carter. Not wearing a hard hat, not covered in dust, but in a tailored suit, badge on his lapel, representing the city's Civilian Oversight Committee. The same man he had shoved, doubted, dismissed. Now sitting as one of the officials with the power to vote on his suspension. There were no outbursts, no shouting, no need. The silence in that room spoke louder than the officer ever had on that construction site. Elijah didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply opened a folder, reviewed a document, and slid it across the table. "This is your formal notice of suspension," he said evenly, pending further disciplinary action. The officer didn't speak. His mouth was slightly open, but no words came. Not a single excuse. Just a slow blink as the reality settled in. He wasn't in control anymore. He was being judged by the very man he had refused to see. Do you think real accountability is possible in cases like this? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. The final moment will leave you speechless. He had shoved him, humiliated him, called him a trespasser, treated him like a threat. And now that same man sat across from him, not in a reflective vest, but in a sharp, dark suit. Calm, professional, steady. Elijah Carter. The man who had built the structure the officer stood on, now held the pen that would decide the officer's future, because what no one expected, what the officer never imagined, was that Elijah didn't just design buildings. He also helped design policy. He served on the city's Ethics Oversight Committee, a role earned not through politics or favors, but through years of public service and respect. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply looked the officer in the eye. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with something far more powerful: accountability. Then, without a word, he reached for the letter, a simple piece of paper, resting in front of him like the final blueprint in a long, painful project. And with a firm, deliberate motion, he signed it. The room was silent. The officer didn't respond. Couldn't. There were no words left to protect him from the weight of what had just happened. He had tried to strip a man of his dignity. And now he sat powerless as that same man quietly delivered justice, not with force, but with grace. Because sometimes justice doesn't shout. It doesn't scream or slam fists on tables. Sometimes justice is quiet, composed, precise, and written in ink by the very hands that were once pushed away. What does justice mean to you? Revenge or dignity? Tell us in the comments. And if this story moved you, subscribe now. We tell the stories that need to be heard.